Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I have something that I'd like to talk to you about today. In today's YouTube video, I'm going to talk to you guys about the genders that are encompassed underneath the umbrella term transgender. Now, I'm sure for a lot of my audience, this might seem kind of common sense-ish. This terminology may not be anything new to you, but if you're anything like me and you're old and decrepit and not as chronically online as you used to be, then some of these terms may seem a little out of pocket or a little out of left field for you. Some of that shit gets really hard to keep up with. So we're going to run through some of these terms today, and I'm just going to give you a very brief synopsis of what it is. I am not an expert on this topic. It's just something that comes up a lot. So I decided, why not brush up on our vocabulary and make sure that we're keeping up with the times. We're all up to date on what the cool kids are saying nowadays. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, as most of you know, transgender is technically classified as an umbrella term. So that means that the word transgender encompasses a lot of subsets. So, for example, the two main subsets of transgender that people typically associate themselves with is binary versus non-binary. For example, I consider myself a binary transgender man because I was born female. I medically transitioned to male. I dress the typical way that a male would dress. All that stereotypical male shit, all that dude stuff. I'm very stereotypically male. Then you have the second umbrella that falls under transgender, and that is the non-binary umbrella. And now we've got the people who kind of either fall in between the two sides of the binary, or they just don't align with any of it at all, and they say, fuck you, I simply do not exist on the gender spectrum, I am an enigma. So today I'm going to show you guys some of the newer ones that I've been hearing recently and that I've been seeing online, and we're going to delve into what it means to be those identities. For example, here on this umbrella picture, we've got gender queer, gender fluid, both of which I'm very familiar with. I was once gender fluid myself. Demi boy, demi girl, bigender, agender, new choice, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and more. We're just going to have to let that light go. The batteries must be fucking dying already. Anyways, I lost my train of thought now. So the first two identities, or the first two terms that I'm going to address with you guys, are the ones that I'm personally the most familiar with, and those are going to be gender queer and gender fluid. First of all, gender queer, a lot of people who identify as gender queer do not specifically use that as their gender identity. It's just a way of queering their gender, so to speak. So a lot of people will say, oh, I'm gender queer, as like a deliberate way of kind of playing with their gender in a very social and like political point of view. So I personally wouldn't categorize being gender queer as like an actual identifier. I would use it more as like a descriptive term. You may feel differently. Then obviously we have to move on to the next one, which is gender fluid. Like I said, I used to identify as gender fluid back when I was first kind of experimenting with my gender and kind of figuring out what my identity really was, and I didn't know whether I was just a really masculine tomboy. I didn't know what the fuck I was, and so I decided to just slap the most generic label I found online, and that was gender fluidity. In summary, gender fluid people kind of have like a gender identity that shifts and changes. It's never really fixed in one place for very long. On certain days, they may identify as male. On other days, they might wake up and they might feel more feminine than they did the other day, and so they may switch back and forth between different pronouns, different gendered names, so on and so forth. They just kind of move. They're fluid. They fluctuate between masculine, feminine, or non-binary identities. Like I said, there's a whole lot of nuance in this type of conversation. Now we're going to talk about bigender and agender. So a person who is bigender obviously literally translates to two genders or double genders, and I feel like that's very self-explanatory. Bigender, that's, you got two genders under your belt. They experience exactly two gender identities, and it's either at the same time or they feel variations between the two gender identities. So usually these two are male or female, but some bigender people can also include non-binary identities. And of course, none of these labels are indicative to how a person might express themselves. So somebody may identify as a transgender man, but they may dress very stereotypically feminine. They may wear makeup, whereas somebody may identify as non-binary and they appear very feminine or masculine, like lumberjack man. They got big muscles, they got a beard, but they're still non-binary. The next label that we're going to talk about is agender. I've also heard people refer to themselves as new choice. I'm very much more used to seeing agender. So people who are agender are not really subscribing to any sort of gender identity in particular. They kind of describe themselves as having like a lack of a gender. They don't feel or see themselves as neither man nor woman or even non-binary, kind of being like gender free or like genderless. Like they just don't give a fuck. They don't see themselves as a gender. They see themselves just as a human being who exists. And that's that. I will say the main differentiating factor that I have noticed between people who identify as new choice and people who identify as agender is that a lot of times people who identify as new choice relate specifically to having gender dysphoria, whereas people who are agender may not experience gender dysphoria. And for that reason, a lot of agender people don't see the necessity of medically transitioning, whereas somebody who identifies as new choice may choose to undergo certain surgeries or hormone replacement therapy, so on and so forth, because they feel that they experience gender dysphoria, feel the desire to make a physical transition to become more gender neutral. Again, all of this stuff is not concrete. There are many different ways that people may categorize themselves under these labels. It's all kind of starting to bleed together, but bear with me, we're almost to the end here. The last two gender identities that I'm going to talk to you guys about is demi-girl and demi-boy. Before we get into demi-girl and demi-boy, obviously we have to talk specifically about demi-genders. So if you identify as demi-gender, that's kind of another umbrella term for people that feel a partial connection to a gender identity, but not a full connection to any particular gender. But obviously there are like three main instances in which you will hear somebody refer to themselves as demi-blank. Demi-girl, demi-boy, and demi-fluid. Starting off first, we've got demi-girl. A demi-girl is a person who is partially a girl, or someone who not entirely identifies as a woman or as otherwise a feminine person. Some people also refer to themselves as a demi-woman, a demi-lady, which I think sounds pretty badass. A demi-boy, similarly to a demi-girl, is somebody who kind of partially identifies with being a boy or being a man or an otherwise masculine person, but not fully. Alternative terms for this can be demi-man, demi-male, or demi-guy. I feel like demi-dude should be added to that list. I'm submitting my official request now for any demi-boys out there. Please, can we make demi-dude a thing? I think that would be so fucking funny. There's so much more in this stuff. Like, you know, there's so much more that you can dig into when it comes to these sorts of labels and this terminology and things. You could go on and the umbrellas could become umbrellas for other umbrellas, and there could be 50 different bajillion umbrellas under one umbrella. It could literally go on forever because gender is just, it's a personal thing. Gender is not really set one way or another. It can change day to day. Like, it's not set binary that we used to believe it was, or at least Western society and culture led you to believe that it was. But yeah, those are just some of the basic labels that I kind of wanted to go over with you guys. Those are the main ones that I've seen floating around, at least on my end of the internet recently. And I was curious. I wanted to know kind of what they meant. I wanted to understand better. I never want to be that old guy on the internet. And I'm not even that fucking old, guys. I'm only turning 25 this year. I know that some of you may think I have a foot in the grave, but really, you know, I'm only about like a quarter way through this bitch. You know what I mean? So I never want to be that old guy on the internet where I'm like, what is that? What does that mean? That's not a real fucking thing. You guys are just making shit up now. I would prefer it if I was at least a little bit more educated than I used to be back when I was early on in my days, and I thought it was just you were either a trans guy or a trans woman, and maybe you could be androgynous and you could be non-binary, but that was it. So yeah, I just wanted to come on here really quick and talk to you guys about this. Let me know in the comments what you think of some of these labels, some of these identities, respectfully. Obviously, we're going to be respectful, as always. Like I said earlier, we could really get into this. My comment section is always open for debates. You guys know that. But yeah, I would love to hear y'all's feedback. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, if you're still watching at this point, thank you so much for sticking around to the end. Go ahead and give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already, and I will see y'all in the next video.